Hi everyone, welcome to the RIOT Science Club. I'm Lorenza and I'm here today together with Elizabeth and Bing from the Rotterdam site of the RIOT Science Club. We are glad to see so many of you coming today for a seminar on Our Markdown and GitHub, a walkthrough for sharing codes and results. We've had many new followers and subscribers since our last RIOT Club, so to all our newcomers, welcome, and to all our regulars, welcome back. So just a bit about the RIOT Club. It is a self-organizing initiative that is entirely ECR-led. We host weekly seminars that aim to raise awareness and provide training in reproducible, interpretable, open, and transparent science. You can see shared here our calendar, and we have a fantastic set of speakers and events lined up. Next week is particularly exciting because first we'll host the conference Open Research, a Vision for the Future. This is all open to all and free and will be fully online. Afterwards, there will also be 2 RIOT seminars that are organized by the KCL and Durham teams of the RIOT Science Club. All our events are entirely free and they're open to everyone. With an internet connection. If you cannot make a particular event or would like to keep track of upcoming events, you can check our website, YouTube channels, and social media accounts. Elizabeth is now sharing the links to these in the Q&A chat. There you will also see links for the Rotterdam RIOT's website and Twitter, where you can learn more about our local events, such as an open research introductory program we are currently organizing with the open science community in Rotterdam. Also, please feel free to contact the RIOT Science Club if you'd like to set up your own site or to join any of the existing sites. Just a bit of housekeeping before we introduce our guest speaker. We host all our events on MS Teams live events. This generates a publicly accessible link so anyone can join, and you may share this link publicly. Live Events is a one-way streaming platform, and you can ask your questions via the Q&A message board. This will be moderated by myself and the co-producers. You can keep your questions and comments relevant and respectful. Questions will be then fed to the speakers during the talk, and we will take specific breaks to address such questions. Finally, if you join late, don't worry, you can pause, rewind, and fast forward. The live events also have a fantastic auto subtitling feature that you can use. All right, now to our main event and speaker. We are here today with Dr. Oliver Payne, who is a postdoctoral research associate at the Social, Genetic and Developmental Psychiatry Centre at King's College London. His work uses statistical genetics to understand and predict outcomes that are related to mental health. Today is here to guide us through the creation of Our Markdown websites, where you can easily share your code and results. This is a practical session, and some materials were developed for the practical. If you haven't downloaded this yet, please click on the Google Drive link that Elizabeth is now sharing in the chat, and make sure you have a GitHub account too. Ollie, I leave you the floor.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I will start sharing my screen. So yeah, thank you very much to the organisers for inviting me to speak here today. It's my pleasure to kind of take you through how to make an R Markdown website, and I'll be talking about R Markdown, but also GitHub, which is a part of the process. So a structure for this talk is I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to what an R Markdown website is, and also about something called Github Pages. And then there will be a kind of practical component, which will be a large part of it, where we're going to use some of the materials I provided to create our first R Markdown website, and then make it publicly available using GitHub. So as Lorenza said, there's some workshop materials I prepared, and there should be a link in the chat for that if you haven't got it already. And to engage with the practical component yourselves, you will need either R or ideally RStudio. with these two packages installed. And you will also need some implementation of Git. I'd recommend using GitHub Desktop and a GitHub account. But if you don't want to kind of partake in the practical, feel free, of course, just to watch. You'll still see how the process works. So first of all, I'm just going to give an example of what an R Markdown website is to try and show you what we're aiming for here. So I'm showing you an example of one of my websites, which shows information regarding a project relating to genotype-based prediction. So if you're interested in polygenic scoring, this website might be of interest to you as well for its content. But what you can see here is, it looks kind of like a normal website. It has a URL, it's publicly available, anyone can find it. And here's the home page, and there's a series of links. And I can click on those links and it'll take me to another page. I can scroll down this. It's got a table of contents, which is nice. And it's got collapsible code chunks. So if you want to, share your code with other people, they can easily find the code and then look through it nicely within this document. And you can also have figures integrated into the document as well. So, just like R Markdown does, if you're familiar with R Markdown, it provides a really nice way of organizing your code and also presenting your results. So this is a kind of taster of what an R Markdown website looks like. There's also many other great examples of... Oh, I've lost my mouse, apologies. There's also other great examples of our Markdown websites on the R Markdown website itself. They've got this gallery, so if you want kind of further inspiration of the amazing, websites you can make using R Markdown, I'd recommend looking at this as well. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to R Markdown for those that aren't familiar with it. So R Markdown is really a method of structuring and visualizing your code and results. And it consists of kind of three components. There's some information at the top of the R Markdown document, which controls the kind of format of the document. And it also has these headers and other descriptive text to help give structure to the document, and then it also contains these code chunks. And I'm now going to kind of describe these more clearly in the next couple slides. So if you're familiar with R or any other coding language, I suppose, this is what you're usually presented with when you ask for someone's script or you're writing your own scripts. Nothing too complex here, but it's got a few limitations. So one is that these scripts can end up being extremely long and difficult to navigate and hard to read. And also, if you have output of these files, you'll have to then go and dig out the figure that you created using the script somewhere else. So it's fine and it works, but it's not ideal. Whereas R Markdown document is just like a normal R script, but it has a few extra components, as I mentioned before. So it has this formatting section at the top where you can specify the title of the document and the theme of the document, which are kind of pre-made formats for the document, which will make it look particularly nice by setting the colors and the font the way you want it. Then it has these annotation section, so you can specify headers using these hashtags and put in bits of descriptive text to help kind of guide people through the document and understand what's going on within the code. And then this section is a code chunk, and it's exactly the same script as was in the previous slide. It's just a normal R script, but you've enclosed it in these in this text here, which indicates it's a code chunk. And I'll explain a little bit more what these different options mean in a few slides' time, but this is a code chunk here. And then lastly, you can have additional parts of this document which will show figures or other documents that you want to kind of read in and then present once you've rendered the document. So this is an R Markdown document or a .rmd file, and then you render this document. And you can do this very easily in RStudio by clicking this knit button. And then this is what you'll get provided with. It's this kind of quite good looking document which has a title, has some text describing what's going on, a code chunk, and then it shows the results of that code side by side with the code itself. So this is a brief intro to R Markdown. There's a huge amount you can do with R Markdown. I've really just shown you the absolute basics. But even with the absolute basics, you can create a really nice file for presenting your results. And it really takes no more time than it would to just write an R script, and may even save you time, because then you don't have to create additional files to then present what you've created. So how does this connect to an R Markdown website? Well, an R Markdown website is really just several R Markdown documents that can link to one another. So, but it does require two additional files to be made. So one of these additional files is called an index page. And this index page is essentially the home page. So it's going to be an R Markdown document which shows you how to get to the other R Markdown documents. And this has to have a very specific file name so that when you render the website, it knows this file corresponds to the index file. And then the other file that it needs is called a YAML file. And this file simply describes the bar at the top of the website. So I'll show you what this means now. So this is an example of an index page. It's very simple. In this case, we just have a home page. This will be where you land when you go to the website's URL. And then you can click on the link and it will take you to another page, which I'm showing here is other page. So this is the kind of structure I'm describing of having an index and then several other R Markdown documents. And then you also have this bar at the top, which is what the YAML file describes. So this bar currently only contains two buttons, one for home and one for a list of other options, but you could have a range of links there for, to take you to useful websites. So I'm not going to talk about this in detail just right now, but so most people will be using R Markdown on within RStudio, which is certainly the easiest way to do it. But it is possible also to use and create R Markdown documents on the command line as well. And I'm aware that most of us will be working on shared servers and working on the command line primarily. So having this option is sometimes useful if you cannot use RStudio in that setting. So if you have questions about that, perhaps we can talk about it later during one of the breaks. So I'm just going to briefly give a few bits of advice that I think are useful when using R Markdown. If you're familiar with R Markdown, feel free to take it or leave it. But I find these to be kind of quite useful. So firstly, it's very useful to be able to show the code chunk in the rendered document without actually running the code, because often the code takes a very long time to run. So it's not practical to run the code every time you want to make a change to your rendered document. And you can do this by setting this option at the beginning of the code chunk, saying eval to false, but echo to true, which means it'll show the code, echo, but it won't run the code, eval. But then, if you have this option and the code is creating figures, then you'll need to read those figures back in so that they're shown in the rendered document. And you can easily do this using an argument that, like I've shown here. So all this information is in the shared files that I've sent you, so you can look back at that if you want to kind of, see how it was done. So there's a few other bits of Our Markdown that are useful. I'm not going to go into them in detail here, but I'm just providing this so you can look back at it if you think it's useful. One is the table of contents. I think this is a really useful feature for navigating long documents. And there's various parameters you can set to control how that table of contents looks and works. And then another one is these collapsible and scrollable code chunks. So, if you go to a website about a project, you want to be able to read it without having to flick through thousands of lines of code, which you may not be interested in. But at the same time, you want that code there. So if you are interested in it, you can just quickly see how it was done and use it. So this information here provides, will show you how to create these collapsible code chunks, which might be of interest to you. So just two other things that are useful. One is being able to insert a blank line to give some structure to the Our Markdown document. And another is using these 3 asterisks to create a line, as is shown under here, which again just helps give structure to the page. But I'll leave it to you from here to figure out how to get the best aesthetic for your website. So, I've given a few bits of advice here, but you've probably been on many Our Markdown websites already, even if you're not aware of it. But if you find yourself on one and you think it's an Our Markdown website, often you'll see a little logo to GitHub somewhere on that page. And if you click it, it'll take you to the GitHub repository where you can see the code that they use to generate the website. And, this is a great way. If you find a website that you like the look of and you want to kind of base your website off it, you can just go and use the code they used to do so. Okay, so we're gonna do the first bit of the practical, which is rendering your first Our Markdown document, and the second step will be rendering 2 Our Markdown documents and then viewing it as a website within RStudio. So I'm going to go through the practical with you, and you can follow along with me, or you can just watch, depending on what you prefer. So as the instructions say, the first step is to find this folder called demo, which is the folder you've downloaded, hopefully, using the link. And within that folder is, there's another folder called website, which we'll come to in a moment, but there's also an Our Markdown document called example markdown, Our Markdown. So I want you to just open that example Our Markdown document in RStudio. And so this is, I'll just go full screen so you can see it a bit clearer. This is the Our Markdown document that I showed in the PowerPoint slides. Same exact structure, got a bit, got a header, got some descriptive text, got the code chunk, and then it's got this code to then read in the figure that's produced when the code is run. So to render this into the HTML file, I just click this knit button up here, and it will quickly run the code and output the document as an HTML file, which looks great, just as expected. And this HTML file, as well as this pop-up coming up, the file's also saved to the directory it was run. So this HTML file can then be sent in an email and shared with colleagues. You can just double click that and it will open it in Google Chrome. So it's a very nice way of sending some new results and with the code so people can see how it was done. So that was step one. You've rendered your first R Markdown document, which is great. And now we're going to render our first website. So the process is the same, really. So go inside the folder called website within the materials, and you'll see there's 3 files here. So we've got the same example rmarkdown.rmd file that we just had. I'd like you to first go to RStudio and close the other version you had open to avoid confusion. Close some of this other rubbish. So go into the new folder, open the example rmarkdown.rmd. I want you to knit this again using the knit button. And you can see it looks a little bit different already. And that's because within that folder is a file called _site.yml, which is the YAML folder I mentioned before. So just by rendering a document in the same folder as this YAML, it's already inserted this bar at the top, which has some functionality. Next, I want you to open the index.rmd file in RStudio. And this is the same as a normal RMD, but it's going to represent our home page. So there's no code in it. It could contain code if you wanted to, but it's really just a way of navigating to the other pages. And I've kept it very simple here. And I just want you to click the knit button for this one as well. And this will create our very basic home page. And we have now created an R Markdown website of sorts. It's not online yet, but its structure is all there. This is the home page. I can click this button. It'll take me to the other rendered document called index.html. And, it's all working. I can click home. It'll take me back to the home page. And there's even this link that I've put in, which will take you to GitHub if you want to do that. But this can be modified later on, but I'm just kind of giving you an example. So it can be as simple as that. I've shown you the basics, but really it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And you've already, got the tools to create a useful website. You can put it up, not yet, we can put it online, but this is multiple R Markdown documents, all kind of integrated with one another, which can be very useful. So I think now would be a good time just to check if I have any questions. Or if you have any questions on what I've discussed so far, feel free to do so now.
Ollie, so far it seems that everything is unclear, but perhaps we can wait just a minute to see if any questions come in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone would like to have the slides. This will be available on OSF, but perhaps we can also share some preliminary slides.
Yeah, I can drop a link to the slides.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, and it seems that we might need to increase the font size for our studio.
Yeah,
is it possible? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'll do actually is I'll just switch onto my laptop because at the moment I'm using a monitor, which I think makes everything look a bit smaller.
All right.
For other people.
We're receiving quite a few new questions. It's great to see that the attendees are involved. So my render page does not show the GitHub icon, but a square instead. By any chance, do you know why this happens?
Yes, I do, and that's absolutely my fault. Apologies. Actually, no, I'm a little bit confused now. Let me think about that for a moment. So basically, the YAML file, I'll quickly show you what the YAML file looks like. I'll help explain. So this isn't something I haven't actually opened yet and just provided, but the YAML file, I'll open it in Notepad++, and I'm going to switch onto my laptop. I hope this doesn't send Teams haywire. Could you just confirm that you can see my screen and it's a decent size? Or is it the same?
It's decent, but please feel free to comment on this.
Okay. I've made it bigger. So this GitHub icon is coming up due to this code here. This YAML file is something I don't fully understand all of the options in specifying this toolbar at the top, but there's lots of examples online, and I've just based mine off someone else's, and exactly for this exact purpose, copying the GitHub logo. And I thought the GitHub logo was something that was kind of inbuilt into our Markdown somehow. Or it was downloading it from GitHub. So if you're not seeing the icon, I'm not exactly sure why, and apologies for that. But it's to do with the YAML file. Yeah, I'm not sure how to clarify. I'm not sure. It might resolve itself once we push the website online. So I think maybe let's see if it does. In the next part of the practical. Are there any other questions that I could?
Thanks, Ollie, for your answers. We have another question. Is it possible to run local R scripts from Our Markdown?
Yes. So you can run an R script in Our Markdown. Yeah, you don't have to copy the code from the R script into the Our Markdown document. You can do that, I think, just by typing source. There's a function called source, and you just put source, open brackets, type the name of the R script file, and it will run whatever that file contains. So yes, you can.
All right, great. So another question, is the second example markdown.rmd file identical to the first, but just in a folder with the Yaml file? Or do you have somehow to tell the .rmd to make a website?
Yeah, no, it's exactly the same file. RStudio is smart. It looks at what else is in that directory and figures out that you want it to be a website. Yeah, so you can make any R Markdown website. You can make any R Markdown document into a website. Just put it in the right folder. Yeah, I think that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah, thanks. We have another question. I'm getting a lot of cannot access parent directories and operation not permitted errors. Do I need to change some settings?
I personally haven't come across that problem before, but so yeah, the only thing I would do is probably have a look on Google, and apologies for being not more helpful than that. It's probably because I would probably try setting your working directory to where the R Markdown file is, just in case that helps. But it may be that wherever the workshop materials are that you've saved is not somewhere that RStudio can easily use. So I'd suggest moving it into your documents or your desktop or something. It may be in a temporary download folder or something like that. So try moving it somewhere else on your computer.
Thanks, Ollie. I see also Elizabeth is talking with this person right now, so I hope we'll manage to solve the problem soon. Some other people found they managed to get the GitHub logo, so that's good to hear. And we have, I think, I don't know if it's the last question, but one other question is, if you set your code to not run in your R Markdown doc, perhaps it's actually good if you read it.
I've just read it, and it's a really great point, and it is a problem when you're not, if you set eval to false when you're running R Markdown, yes, it could create a disconnect between the code that you've run and the code shown in your R Markdown document. And so, it shouldn't be done unnecessarily. If you're running an R script that just takes a few seconds, then keep it as is. But for most of my analyses, that is just not an option. Often within my R Markdown documents, my code chunks aren't just R. They'll often be commands, bash commands, running genetic analyses that take days. So that's more the scenario I'm thinking. You can still include the code and show it without running it when you render the document. But yeah, it's an important thing to remember, and try and avoid that disconnect at all costs. Something that's useful regarding that is the next part as well. When we upload these to GitHub, if there are changes to the code and you're not aware of it and you haven't noted it down, then those changes will be within your GitHub kind of history. So that could help kind of avoid kind of confusion, because you can see the changes as they've occurred. So, but yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. We have another new question. If I have code that runs a very long time, I just want to copy the code instead of running it. How do I then load the output of the code for further use in the R Markdown file? Can I somehow load data frames?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do this all the time. So I save tables as whatever format you want. I save them as CSVs, or I save figures in whatever format, and then you can just read in those tables and those figures when running the R Markdown document in a separate code chunk. So have the code chunk that produced the plot, and then have another bit of code to read it back in, just the results file. So that's absolutely how you do it. And if you want to see examples of that, check out my GitHub page, and you'll see examples of me doing that all the way through.
Awesome, thank you. I think we might be to the last question, by Florence. Hi.
Yeah. So yeah. I can, if that's okay, I can see it. So yeah, it's about how's the YAML file created, and that's a good question. So I've provided one that is kind of in its most basic form, but and to be honest, I don't speak the language of YAML, so I just look at other people's examples and just pinch the relevant parts to make it the way I want it. So this .yaml file is just a text file. You can open it in any text editor and see what's inside. It's very simple. There's usually only a few lines of code. So I based mine off what I've pinched from other websites, and hopefully that's useful for you. Okay, shall we move on to the next part? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. and get back to my slides. Okay, wonderful. So now's the part about where you can actually make your website publicly available. This is the aim. It's great to make these, websites even locally on your computer. It could be useful, but really, this is most useful when it's online. And a really good way of doing this is using GitHub. So GitHub is a website for storing and sharing code. And you're probably aware of it because lots of software now publish their software on GitHub for you to download easily. But also loads of researchers use it for saving their code because it's not just a way of storing and sharing your code, but it also records any changes to the code, which means you can look back in time to see if code's been modified, if your code suddenly breaks, or if you're trying to replicate results, you can see the code that was used at that exact time to replicate the finding. So that concept is called version control. But GitHub also has this feature called Github Pages, which allows people to publish Our Markdown websites, which is a really useful feature. So I'm just going to talk about these steps first, and then we'll go through it together, kind of live. The first step is to create a Git repository, and this will be done locally on your computer. So you can do this using software called GitHub Desktop, which is a kind of graphical user interface version of Git, which you can click buttons to create repositories and send your changes to GitHub, or you can, again, I'm just going to kind of mention throughout, there is always the option to do this on the command line. So this is totally usable if you work on the command line only. So the first step is create your Git repository and add the relevant files to that repository. It'll just be a folder on your computer. The next step is to push your repository to GitHub. So currently your repository is sat on your laptop and you want to get it on GitHub, which is online. So you have to, it's called push your repository to GitHub. And if you're using GitHub Desktop, you can just click the Publish Repository button. Or if you're using the command line, you can use commands such as shown here. And when you create a repository, often these bits of code are actually provided either on GitHub, or you can quickly find them on Google because they're obviously very commonly used. So don't worry too much about memorizing them. But after a while, you will get used to them if you're using the command line. So the next step is, so now you've pushed your repository to GitHub, it is now on GitHub. And if you go to the GitHub website and go to your account on GitHub, you will be able to find the repository called whatever you called it. And the next step is then to go to the settings tab where you'll be able to find a section called Github Pages. And in this section, it's going to warn you that the repository is private. So that, you'll only get this warning if you've made your repository private when you created it. But this isn't a problem if you can have the code private and still publish the website. The website will still be public. So just be aware, if it's a private repository and you're making a website using it, people can still see the website. So don't publish, anything private. But at the same time, if you want to keep the code private but still show people the results, then you can do that as well. Anyway, so you find the GitHub Pages section and click the Save button, and then GitHub will tell you your site is ready to be published at this address. So it's created a URL for your repository's website, and then you just click that and it'll take you to it. Now, often, half the time when you do this, if it's the first push of the repository and it's the first time you're rendering the website, you'll often see this. It's very frustrating, but you just wait a minute and GitHub will figure out that it's a website and then publish it. So, you know, it should take a minute, really maximum. And if it's still not showing up, then try making a very minor change, any change at all, and just pushing again to GitHub. And that kind of reminds it that it needs to do something for your account. It's a weird glitch within GitHub. So yeah, if it's not showing up, just push another change, any change, and it will then render. So that's just a little gotcha. So yeah, now we're going to do this together. So I'm going to put that there. So the first step is to create a Git repository containing the rendered website files. So I'm going to go, just to remind myself where. So this is my GitHub. This is the folder containing my GitHub website files that we've just rendered together. And I'm going to open GitHub Pages, GitHub Desktop, sorry. Okay, so just ignore this. So this is what you'll see when you open GitHub Desktop. It's quite a nice program. And you're looking for this button here, which says create a new repository on your hard drive. And we're just going to click that. So we're going to give the repository a name. I'm just going to call it test website. It can be called anything you like, but I just, just for this example, you can give it a description if you want to give a kind of one-liner to guide people into your repository, but this isn't necessary. And then for the path, I'm going to set the path to be the folder that already contains the website files, which it's already found. So for me, that's the demo folder and then website. And you can leave everything else as is. I'm kind of keeping it as simple as it can be because it doesn't have to be any more complicated, but if you're going to look into this more, you might want to look up what the Git license is, for example, and things like that. But it's not essential at this point. So then I just click Create Repository. Okay, so it's created a repository. And it's already offering me to push it to GitHub. I'm just going to show you what's happened to the folder. So the folder itself hasn't changed, which is a little bit surprising. Fine. And I'm just going to, now we've created the repository on our computer, we're now going to push it to the GitHub website. So I'm just going to click the Publish Repository button. Again, it's asking me about the name of the repository, which I'm just going to leave the same. And it has this default setting of making the repository private. You can change this later, just to make you aware. It's going to be a private repository automatically. I'm going to leave it as a private repository, so only I can see it. And click the Publish Repository button. Okay, so now it has sent the repository to GitHub. If I go to GitHub and look at my repositories, I can see there is a new repository updated 25 seconds ago called test_website. So it seems as though the repository I've created does not contain the files that I hoped it would. So I'm just going to remedy that. Right. So when I was, and this was warned by Lorenza before I did this, so I should have known better. But when I created the GitHub repository, I accidentally created a new folder inside the folder containing the website documents. So I called it test website. It's created a new folder called test website, which is the GitHub repository. So what we need to do is just drag the website files, which is everything except the new folder, into that folder. So all I've done is drag the rendered documents, the .yaml, etc., and put it inside this new folder, which is the repository. And if we look at GitHub desktop now, it's noticed there's been some changes in that repository. So this is the part of the kind of version control aspect of Git, and it will show you what all the changes are. All of the files are new. So what we're going to do is we're going to commit these changes. So this is a nice little example, I suppose, of making commits. So we're going to send these changes to the GitHub version of the repository, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of, you have to give it these messages when you make comments to indicate what's happened. And I'm just going to write added website files. Could be whatever you want, and then commit to main. So what this is doing is it's pushing these changes to the GitHub website. It's creating a comment, a comment of those changes, and then I push that comment to GitHub. So there's two steps. You create the commit, which is a collection of changes, and then you push that commit to the GitHub. Okay, so that's now pushed, and if I now go to GitHub and refresh, okay, so it's now the files are there as hoped. So this is what's just been pushed less than a minute ago, and now I'm going to go to the settings tab to activate my GitHub Pages website. So it's just on the normal page. You just scroll down, and there's the section called GitHub Pages, and you just want to tell it which folder to base the website off. Which branch. So there's something else to do with GitHub, which I haven't talked about yet, which is these branches, but you don't have to worry about this right now. There's only one branch currently, which is the main branch, and you're just going to select main. So this means it's going to base the website off the files that are in your repository. And then you click save. So it's done that, and now if you scroll back down to GitHub Pages, it says your site is ready to be published at this address. And if I click that, as I warned, it says there is no website here. But a good way of remedying this is to go to the repository again, just make any change. So you can do this locally, or you can do this on GitHub itself. So it gives me the option of adding a README. So I'm just going to use this as an example. So a README is just a file that describes what the website is. And I'm just going to edit it and say hi. And then I'm going to save those changes. And that should hopefully be enough to tell GitHub to do something. And now if you go to your website and give it a second, voila. Okay, so our rendered website is now online. And we can click the buttons and it will take us to the next one. And we have now made our Markdown website publicly available on GitHub. So, there's not that many steps to it. Once you've got to grips with creating a repository and pushing it to GitHub, you just have to kind of turn it on in the settings, and it just is there, which is really great. Just go back to my slides, check there was anything there. So yeah, just have a look at the website, and now you've hopefully created your first website, have a go at changing it. So go to the local files. So this is my local version of the repository. If I, let's say, open the index file and I want it to say, hello world, I just save that file and then go to GitHub desktop again. It'll once again identify that there's been a change to that file. I'm going to create a comment and just say update. It's not a very helpful message, but it's just quick. Create the comment. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten an important step. So if you make a change to your R Markdown file, you then need to render it again so that the change is also seen in the HTML file. So you render it, then it's picked up this other change. I'm just going to say update again, commit that change. Now I can push those changes to GitHub again. So this is another nice example. So because I created that README file on GitHub, the repository on GitHub is actually slightly different to the repository on my computer now. So you can modify a repository from two different computers. And if you do that, you then need to merge those changes. And Git will automatically identify if there's conflicts between those changes. In this case, there shouldn't be, because all we did was create a README file, which won't conflict with any of the files on this repository because there was no README file. So I quite like GitHub Desktop. I've never used it before kind of preparing for this workshop, but actually I think I might in the future if I work on my laptop ever, because it just makes this process quite easy of pushing and pulling and seeing the changes in your repository. Okay, so I've now pushed those changes to GitHub, and again, you're going to have to give it some time because it takes a minute for GitHub to realize there's been a change, but you can see the change has occurred on GitHub 31 seconds ago. A push was made, and hopefully, if I refresh this, yeah, okay, so the change I made, it now says hello world. So you can see it's very easy to modify once you get going, and hopefully that was useful. I think now we should perhaps take some questions based on that part.
Ollie, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really great, and we also got compliments from the attendees saying that it's incredible how it went so smoothly, given that it's such a complex demo, like it's such a complex topic. So well done, and thank you so much. In terms of questions, I think the first one was whether we could keep a record of scripts and render websites in GitHub without having to share it openly.
Sorry,
So do we?
You can't make a website and put it online, and you can create a website and no one will know it exists, and you can just share the link with whoever you want, but it's still online, so there is a chance that someone could come across it by accident. So yes and no. I've created websites that I just wanted to share with a collaborator, and I didn't particularly mind if other people saw it, but I didn't want to make it completely public at the same time. So yes and no, but you can't make a private website. And if you want to do that, I would suggest rendering it locally and then just sharing the HTML files that you've created with your collaborators or whoever.
Yep, thanks, Ollie. And another question is about will the GitHub desktop track all changes you make to the directory or only the committed changes?
That's a great question. It'll track any changes, regardless of whether you commit them or not. So and this is useful. So if I've got Git repositories which I've been modifying for say a week. None of those changes have been committed, and none of them have been pushed to GitHub, but they are all still tracked, which means I can, if I made a mistake 3 days ago but I didn't commit it, I can still figure out what may have caused it by seeing what changes have occurred. So yes is the short answer.
I think the next questions are very much compliments, and okay, then there is one from Marianne about the connection between the files in the local directory and the ones pushed into Git. Suppose I have done what you have just done and I have this nice website. Now my computer is stolen or I change computers. Git keeps the file, right? And I can also update the link between the Git repository and my new local folder.
Yeah. So you can modify the website from any computer. All you need to do is pull. This is another advantage of using GitHub. Is your repository is on GitHub, so you can then pull that repository onto any computer, modify it, and then push the changes back to GitHub. Not anyone can do this. Only the owner of the GitHub account can make changes to the repository unless you assign collaborators within GitHub. So you don't need to worry about other people changing your website. But yes, you can modify the website from any computer which has access to the internet.
So I guess that's our last question, or?
Sorry to interrupt. I think there's one more question that is actually asked by multiple participants, and they all ask whether you have to pay for GitHub to publish your website. It tells people that they have to upgrade and pay. I don't recall it myself, but maybe you, Ollie, have experience why this problem could come up?
I've never been told that I have to pay, but that may be because so anyone using I don't know. Well, I mean, maybe it's due to this. I personally think it's a free service, but it may be due to the fact that I've put my account as a pro account. So anyone working in research can make their profile pro, and all that means is you get access to some of the features for free, because GitHub wants to make it itself accessible to anyone who's using it for non-profit purposes. So if you're getting that message, maybe it's due to the pro account thing, and if it is, just make your account pro, and just it's a very simple process. You just have to tell it what institution you're at, I think.
Ollie, I also have another solution. I have encountered this another time, and one way to solve it is just to make sure that the visibility settings on your GitHub repository are changed. So essentially, when you push to GitHub the website, instead of having make this a private repository, you can make it public directly. So you untick the option, and then you will not have that problem anymore.
That's great. Thank you, Lorenza. Yeah, and in case you're wondering, you can make the website we've just created public within the settings of GitHub as well. So you don't need to recreate the repository.
Perfect, thanks a lot. I think that'll help. And indeed, in the meantime, also one of our attendees noted that if you set it to public, that it solves the problem. In the meantime, we've gotten a few new questions. And one is, how do you use these Our Markdown websites in concert with your preprints for pre-publication peer review?
So I think it's kind of up to you, but I make these websites publicly available throughout the whole process, and just right at the top, this is under development. I'm not particularly worried about, people stealing code or anything like that. It's more useful to find collaborators that way. So I just have the code developing on the website the whole time. And then if the preprint does come out or the paper, then I'll put a link to the paper and say this work corresponds to this paper. But you can, it's up to you. You don't have to make it public until you are ready. I'm just looking at the other questions. So I think I missed this. There's one saying I missed this bit. If we just want to share results / code, not publish the website, could we send the RMD file or HTML link to others? Yes. Yeah, you can send an RMD file, but yeah, probably more useful to send the HTML file just via an email. The files work by themselves. They don't need to be online to work. So yeah, you can absolutely share them that way. And
I think other than that, we've covered all the questions. I've tried to keep track as well as I could. And I think the fact that we've got so many really tells that people were engaged by this practical. And I think the last few comments that people have added are ways to circumvent having to pay for making it publicly available.
Great. Well, I'll just finish off by saying that within the slides that I shared in the chat, there's at the end, there's a few links to useful resources for learning more about everything we've talked about, Our Markdown websites, Git and GitHub. So check those out if you want more information, or just Google it. There's loads out there.
All right, thank you so much, Ollie. We'll share the slides on OSF so you can keep track of those there, and the recording will be on our YouTube page. So again, please check the links we shared at the beginning. Ollie, this was great. Again, really nice to see such a complex topic in such simple words. And we'll see you next time. Remember, there's the Open Research Conference and another couple of events next week. So it's a busy rioting week. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.